Hello there, it's Deborah Irene with Storytime, coming to you today with stories and lessons from my mother. Before I get started with the story that I'm going to read to you today, I thought I would answer a question that I get asked many times. When I have written blogs or stories, people say, how do you come up with the idea? How do you start your story, or how do you get started in it? And I tell people that for me, usually I'm just about my ordinary daily life, going about my business for the day, and I will see something that will either spark a memory or remind me of something. And so I would sit down and start writing about that. And that's how many of my stories for my book, Someday I Will Write, Reflections, came about, is just going about my normal life and something triggering a memory or a thought because of something that I was doing at the moment. I have found the same thing to be true in my YouTube channel and reading these stories and lessons from my mother. I actually took out my Christmas decorations because I'm going to be gone for Thanksgiving, and I thought that I would put up my Christmas decorations today. And as I was decorating my little tree, I remembered years ago of helping my Aunt Delta decorate for something. And I'll leave it at that for now. But I happen to think, oh, Aunt Delta is the next sibling in my mother's book that we will be telling her little story. So I decided to do a YouTube today about my Aunt Delta, my mother's sister, Delta Viola, because I was reminded of her when I put up my Christmas tree today. So if you recall, we have been paying tribute to my mother's siblings because she wanted everybody to know what a wonderful family she came from. So at the back of her book, Helen's Heritage, we have a section called The Clan, where we have a family tree, and she devoted one chapter to each one of her siblings. She was so thankful for her siblings, all of them. They all played a role in her life and left an impression, she being the youngest. And so at this time of Thanksgiving, I know she was thankful for her family. And today, we are going to read about her sister, Delta Viola. And at the end, after we read some of my mother's thoughts, I will say a few things as well. So here we go. Here is my Aunt Delta. Now she had 10 children that we're going to read about. This was a picture of her and 7 of her children that were born up to that point in time. And this is a picture of my Aunt Delta, my mother's sister, in her later years. We all loved her very much. So let's read about her. Delta Viola. She was born on May 29, 1913. So remember now, this is my mother's voice. She's talking about her sister Delta. She was the sixth child and 4th daughter. She married John Cox as a young woman and bore 10 children. 2 boys and 8 girls. Delta was one of the smartest women I have ever known. She did not have a great deal of formal education, but she embodied so much common sense and wisdom. She was a self-taught master, but more importantly, she was a spiritual giant. For advice or anything I wanted or needed spiritually, I went to Delta. She was the one I could always go to and count on for prayer. She was a prayer warrior and faithful to her God, church, and family. She was confident in approaching God's throne and knew how to pray down heaven on earth. She depended on God and knew He was the source of her strength. If I had to come up with one word to describe her, it would be sweetness. When I was about 10 years old, I carried wood inside for a neighbor lady for her fire. She paid me once with a little cream pitcher. Delta loved dishes and asked if she could keep it for me. Over the years, I saw it occasionally in her home, and she reminded me, I'm still keeping it for you. When I moved back to Missouri as an adult, she gave it to me, and I have it to this day. She always did exactly what she said. Even when she was so sick those years in a nursing home and moved between her children, she was still kind to everyone. She had a sweet spirit. When she neared the end of her life at the age of 92, after her last failing, she wanted her family there, as many as could come of her children and grandchildren, and she asked for her sisters. Eunice and I were there. I was not at her side the day she died, February 12, 2006, but oh, how I wish I had been. It was another spiritual moment. Her oldest daughter, Charlene, said, I stood at the foot of the bed as her granddaughter, Michelle, ministered to her, wiping her drool with a washcloth. I knew when her spirit left her body. I threw up my hands and screamed. Others said I shouted, and we all cried. Charlene also told of Delta saying the most beautiful prayer for one of her other daughters, Myrtle, even though she had not been able to talk much in previous days. Another unusual thing, her daughter Joyce had made a pot of pasta because there had been so many visitors. That pasta never ran out. It seemed like the story of 5 fish and 2 loaves that fed a multitude. I looked over at Debbie, and that was me, when telling this story, and noticed she was crying. I wiped tears too. It was a sacred moment. I know Delta was with us in spirit even then. She was my beloved blood sister, but also my sister in Christ, and I will see her again. And I remember that day, as we were putting stories together for my mother's book, frequently on Sunday afternoons, I would go visit her. If I wasn't able to visit her, I would call her, and we would get some more material written down for this book. And I remember that day so well. I had never heard this story before, and it was a very spiritual moment and we both cried because it was just like Aunt Delta was right there in the room with us. Now, her children were Ruby Charlene, who was born in 1931, and she is still alive. Edna Pearl, who was born in 1934, Benton Mays in 1937, and he just recently passed away. James David, who was born in 1938, Eula Rosella in 1940, Beverly Ruth 1941, Anna Lee in 1942, Myrtle Sue in 1946, Regina Kay, whom we call Gina, in 1948, and Joyce Maxine, the baby, was born in 1951. Those were her 10 children. I have to say that as you read through my mother's book, Helen's Heritage, you will see stories of Aunt Delta. She comes up frequently in my mother's book. And if you don't have a copy of it, I would encourage you to get a copy and read about all of my mother's siblings. I have to tell you, when I wrote my first book, Reflections, I didn't specifically set out to really say anything about my Aunt Delta, but she did show up in the chapter that I wrote about my grandpa. And I'd just like to read that little bit to you, because this is a little bit of what she meant to me as well. And I'm speaking about my grandfather here, where I say, you provided a spiritual foundation for your family, and your passion for seeking the kingdom of God has been passed down through the generations. On occasion, I would spend the night with Aunt Delta, attend services with her, and gained much spiritual insight from this daughter of yours and daughter of the King. My Aunt Delta, my mother's sister, Delta Viola, was a woman of faith, a great woman of faith, a great spiritual woman, a spiritually gifted woman. And if you don't understand what I mean about gifts of the Spirit, you could read up on that in the New Testament, because she was a spiritually gifted woman as well. She had some funny moments too. And I know if her daughters or her sons were here, they would have many, many stories to tell. I feel privileged to be able to tell a few. And I know when she would round up as many kids who had spent the night on Saturday nights when she was raising her children, and make sure that everybody went to church on Sunday morning. And sometimes that was a challenge. And there would always be a meal Sunday afternoon for anybody that wanted to show up. I remember when I was about 11 years old, and this was after her husband John had passed away, and she left the family home and moved into town. And it happened to be just a few blocks from where we lived. She asked me if I would come. I believe it was on a Saturday over. She wanted to hire me, and she wanted me to help her put up her Christmas decorations, because she was having all of her children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren over that Sunday afternoon, and she hadn't decorated yet. And she asked me if I would please come and help her decorate. So I did. I spent the day, and I believe it was on a Saturday, and helped her put up her decorations. I don't know how really helpful I was to her. I did do what she asked me to do, and she showed me what to do. I hope that I earned my money that day. But as she paid me, and I even think I may have even tried to refuse the money, but she insisted I take the money. Do you know why? Things were hard for us in those days, and we didn't have a lot of extra money. And she said, I want you to take this money and buy something for your mother for Christmas. She was thinking of my mother even then. She was thinking of others. I hope everyone listening to this in my extended family knew Delta Viola, either knew her as aunt, mom, grandma. I hope you can remember her. And if not, I would encourage you to get my mother's book for Christmas, buy it for somebody for Christmas, and read about all of my mother's siblings. You can read quite a bit about my Aunt Delta in here. And some people have asked me, how do I get your books? The easiest way to get my books, they are all available online, but if the easiest way to find them is to go to my website, which is Deborah, D-E-B-R-A, Irene, IRENE.com, DeborahIrene.com. And there are links on my website to all three of my books. All you have to do is click on them, and there will be options there to purchase it either through Amazon, Barnes & Noble, or Wespo Press. And so this is Deborah Irene coming to you today with stories and lessons from my mother. You have a great Thanksgiving, and we'll be back before Christmas with another story.